We'll make a start, and then we can always recap towards the end of the session if anybody misses anything that they think they need to know more details about. So, hello everybody, welcome along to this session on Are You Ready for Level 2 Accreditation? My name is David Elcock. I am the director of the Northwest Skills Development Network, and I will be co-presenting this to you this afternoon with my colleague Jane, who will introduce herself now.
Yeah, hiya. Hello, I'm Jane Paling. I am director of East of England Finance Academy, and yeah, here with David, hopefully for I was going to say for the next 45 minutes, but obviously we'll see how long we need for the session. So the more that you can ask us, the more you'll get out of us. But delighted to be here today.
Thank you very much, Jane. I'm just going to start this with my usual caveat around Towards Excellence accreditation. I know we've got a few colleagues from the Northwest who've joined us this afternoon. I can see Laura from the Walton Centre on my screen at the moment. Just to say, lots of this probably won't be directly relevant to colleagues in the Northwest because of our Towards Excellence programme and our assurance group that we have, who kind of works with you to ensure that everything's ready when you're going for level 2. That's not to say you're not welcome to join us. Of course you are, but hopefully none of this will come as a surprise to you, and you should be getting plenty of help from your assessors and from the dreadfully named TFAG as well. But if you have any questions, please do ask them. And on that note, Jane and I are quite happy to answer questions as we're going along. If you want to put something in the chat or stick your hand up, we'll stop and answer those questions straight away. Obviously, this is a session for you, not for us. So if there's things you want to understand, then please do give us a shout. So, having said all of that, we will move on. So, just a quick introduction from me, then I'll pass over to Jane. Jane's going to do a little bit for you around some of the key issues. I'm going to talk around some of the stuff that we've introduced recently, which are our red lines, things you absolutely have to have in place. And then Jane will do a quick summary at the end. So just to remind you that if you've just joined us, could you please make sure you're on mute as well, so you're not disturbing colleagues as we're presenting. Thank you. So hopefully this slide will not come as news to any of you. There are 3 levels for Towards Excellence. Level 1 is good practice, showing that you're meeting the basic levels of finance staff development. Level 2 demonstrates a high level of performance, and we're looking to see that your culture is innovative and supportive at that level. And level 3 is a leading edge NHS finance function. For those of you outside the Northwest, level 1 you will realise is a self-assessment process, and then level 2 and level 3 you have assessors appointed to come and work with you to see where you are in terms of your evidence. Colleagues in the Northwest, we obviously have all 3 levels are peer assessed, so that's why some of this afternoon might not be strictly relevant to you. Trying to understand the difference between the 3 levels, there are two ways in which we look at this really as assessors. The first one is around the policies that you've got in the organisation. Level 1, your self-assessed level, is really just to demonstrate that there are policies that are in place. So for each of the criteria where it's required, you can demonstrate to yourselves that you've got something in place that meets that requirement. Level 2, we look at the policies that you've got, we assess them, and we're trying to see that those policies are actually working and not just sat on the finance director's shelf gathering dust and are never looked at. And then level 3 is around making sure that those policies are making a difference, not just to the organisation, but to the finance team, but to the wider organisation. So we talk to budget holders, we talk to the chief exec to understand that those things you've got in place around training and development within your department really are making a difference across the whole organisation. For another way of looking at it is around where the focus is of the work that you're undertaking. For level 1, the focus really is on the finance department. Is everything okay within the department? Have you got policies in place to support what's happening there? Have you all got your appraisals, your job descriptions, and so on? Level 2, the focus is a little bit more on how the department operates as part of the organisation. So, are you speaking regularly with budget holders? Do you have a good profile with the chief exec? Are there things happening in the organisation that only happen because finance is involved? That sort of idea. And then for level 3, we're looking to see that the organisation is really working as part of the local ICS, the region, or even nationally. So at level 3, we're looking for evidence that you're working much more widely. to go back to the point of today's presentation, that level 2 really is, if you look at the slide there, it's really looking at, are the policies you have in place working? Are they operational? Is everyone in the team aware of them? Are they functional, as I say? And then level 2 is really seeing how you as a department are integrating with your organization and making a difference to the organization, not just being perhaps a slightly old-fashioned back office service, sending budget statements out and not actually speaking to budget holders and so on and so forth. So hopefully those two lenses, if you like, the way he's looking at the difference between level 1 and level 2 are useful background to what we're going to talk about in the next few slides. So I shall pass you over to Jane, who's going to talk about some of the key points you need to think about in moving from level 1 to level 2.
Brilliant, thanks, David. So this is designed really for people who are thinking at the beginning of level 2. Now, I'm conscious that there are people at all sorts of different stages. Some of you I know, are about to submit your level 2, so hopefully this will be a good refresher. But what we've done is thought about, you've done your level 1, you've hopefully had that in place for a little while, and you're starting to plan and think about what do you need to do for level 2. So in terms of things to think about in looking at whether or not you're ready, first of all, I mean, this is fundamental to all levels really, but is your Chief Finance Officer, your DOF, fully bought into the process? Now, that's partly because there will be, as part of the level 2 process, for particularly for people not in the Northwest who've not been through an accreditation at level 1, when you do your assessment at level 2, there is a significant process. Obviously, have a look at that, and part of it is that there are interviews with various different people across the department, a key one of which is the CFO, the DOF. So it's really important that they know that the process is happening, that they're bought into it, as much as really significantly for that actual session, but more significantly to make sure that they're supporting you, that they're actually, this is a process that they want to happen. They're giving you the space to do it. They're giving you the leadership. They're basically, helping take away any barriers. So, if they're not on board, to be honest, I would kind of firstly, why not? And there's a job to do in terms of persuading them with that. But if they're not on board, or if they say this is not the right time, then I would take that as a really strong suggestion that it's something that you might want to come back to a little bit later down the track. So hopefully that's the case. Your CFO's on board, and the next real question is about timing. So what we've put on the slide is that the best time, taking on board what David's just said about this needing to be about embedding and demonstrating that your policies are not just in place, but they're being embedded in your organisation, is recommended that it should be at least 12 months after you've submitted your level 1, but less than 3 years. So because level 1 expires after 3 years, and so the ideal window is when that's had enough time to embed, but before it runs out. So that's the time scale. I have been involved in assessing an organisation that's gone for level 2 more quickly, less than a year after submitting level 1. And for me, you can see that it's definitely too early for them. So do have a think about that. So that's not to say that you can't be preparing for it, and absolutely everything that you're doing, as soon as you've got on with level 1, moving on to level 2 is great in terms of your thought processes, but in terms of actually making that submission, it's recommended that you leave it for at least 12 months. And then I think the most significant bit for me in terms of what I've learned as I've been an assessor over the last couple of years is that level 2 builds on level 1. Now, that sounds really obvious when you say it, but actually, I think what happens in a lot of organisations, and certainly, it would have done in my organisation had I been doing it, people tend to look at level 2 in isolation. So there's a whole set of standards for level 2. And quite often it's a different person who's doing level 2 to the person who led level 1, or particularly if you're in CCG, ICB land, maybe the organisation's changed. So the level 1 might be a little bit of a distant memory, and people pick up the level 2 standards and look at those and try to answer those as though that's all that you're looking at. But actually, when you look at the standards fully across the 3 levels, what you can see is that the level 2 builds on level 1, and the expectation from the assessors is that the level 1 stuff is being done, and the level 2 is an extension of that. It's not something that's separate. So what assessors will do is they will look at some of the level 1 evidence. If it's not clear from the level 2, you might need to go back and look at the level 1 evidence, and David will talk a little bit about some of the red lines a little bit later in the session. But what it does mean in an ideal world is that you have gone back, and when you come to do your level 2, you also look back at your level 1, which will be at least a year ago. You need to check that the standards, check for any updated standards, because the national group is making sure that the standards stay up to date. So, for example, recently we brought in things around environmental sustainability and talent management to make sure that it's capturing all the latest development areas. So you need to have a look at them in terms of any new standards, but also making sure that your level 1 evidence is still up to date. So that doesn't mean going through absolutely everything on your level 1 and restarting it from scratch. Nowhere near. What it just means is that just kind of having a look at it. Hopefully these are policies and standards that you're using as a matter of course, and just making sure that they are up to date. And so for things like, say, your budget holder survey, that might be something that you if you've got a year later's worth of your survey, or the results of that, or something that you've done on your equality and diversity analysis, making sure it is up to date so that it gives you a good up-to-date basis for your level 2. So, and that leads, I should have read these better, shouldn't I, David? Sorry. But basically, what that's doing by reassessing that level 1 is making sure that your standards are up to date. And what we're looking for at level 2 is that they're actually there and they are being used. So the kind of things we do as part of the level 2 is we look at the policies for people outside of the Northwest. At level 1, it is self-assessed. So level 2 is the first time that you necessarily submit all of those policies. So you look at the policies as an assessor, but then you test them. So when we meet with the finance departments, we're basically doing a triangulation exercise, and we're asking people, when was your last appraisal, etc. So you're kind of looking to check that the policies and the things that are being talked about in the written evidence is being demonstrated, so that members of staff recognise it. Now, it's really important to point out it is not an audit. We are not looking at every detail of every policy and kind of marking it against a model template. It's about what works for your department. There are some kind of basics that the assessors are looking for, but it really is about it's more about the culture of it, knowing that it's important to have a policy on, say, home working or whatever the policy might be, and that people are recognizing it and using it. It's not a test. It's not a you must have a perfect set of policies that sit on the finance director's shelf, as David said. It's about having working policies that are good for your team and that are being borne out in practice. And so, as per the last point, are your policies really beginning to make a difference? That's what we're looking for as we get to the assessment. Thanks, David. You can switch on to the next one. So got a few more points on this slide. So I've kind of covered it on the previous one, but making sure that your evidence is current, both for your level 1, but particularly for your level 2. So for example, there are quite a lot of standards where we're asked for things like have people, say, been sharing information on training courses that they've been to. How do you do that? And you would be looking to make sure that firstly, there are a number of different things that are demonstrated, but there are also some recent stuff in there. So if actually you say, oh yeah, someone 3 years ago went on a training course and did a really nice presentation on it, the assessors would think, oh, that's great, but actually, has anything happened in the 3 years since that piece of evidence? So do try to give a bit of a range, try to give a range of dates, and make sure that where you can, that you've got some things that are up to date, that's showing that this is something that's an ongoing process, is not just a one-off. So the next point is question and ask yourself, is your evidence fully documented? So quite often what happens is people will, as part of their evidence, just write a little comment and go, oh yes, we're really good at sharing newsletters in the organisation. That's not a good example, but you get my drift. So people kind of make a statement saying we're really good at X, but actually there's nothing to support that. Put yourself in the mind of an assessor. If someone said to you, well, I'm really good at doing something, you'd kind of think, okay, well, I've really got to check that. So think about what it would be that would demonstrate that. So, for example, if you're saying, rather than saying, oh, we send out a monthly newsletter, put some examples in there, put a recent one, put a show that there have been a series of them over the last 6 months. But do, try to kind of think, it's almost a little bit like I say to my daughter, a bit of exam technique, make it easy for the assessors by showing them in an easy way. Now, don't go to the other extreme and flood them with about 200 copies, but just kind of, think about, put yourself in the mind of an assessor, think, what would I want to see here? 2 or 3 examples of something that includes something fairly recent, and that should really help your assessor to understand that you've definitely achieved that standard. So carrying on from that, make sure that evidence really shows that the criteria has been met. And it makes me smile, the comment in brackets here, which I think David must have written. Yeah, the amount of times you get a kind of a piece of evidence which is just a meeting invite showing that someone attended a certain working group, or a comment in a minutes. Well, that's kind of that's part of the evidence, but it doesn't really show you what happened. It's not really showing any focus or any outcomes. It's great that someone's been invited to a meeting, but if actually it's a Teams meeting and they just sat there and listened to it and not contributed anything, that may not have actually been that helpful. So really try and think about evidence that is going to demonstrate to the examiner what's happened. Examiner, there you go. I'm in school mode there. To the assessors, what have happened. Try and have a think about what was it, what meeting was it that they went to, what contribution did they make to it, what was the outcome. I think that would be much more helpful than just a meeting invite. And I think that leads on to the next, the penultimate comment here, that saying that you will meet a criteria in the future doesn't mean that you're meeting it now. And please don't take that too much out of context. It is acceptable to have some or a few standards that you haven't fully met, and to discuss that with the assessors, and the assessors may then put that in as a development point as part of your accreditation. However, saying that you're going to do something doesn't mean you've achieved it. It's as I say, it's an acceptable thing to do for a couple of standards, and we all know that everyone is constantly learning and improving, and you won't be 100% on things, but to demonstrate that you've achieved a standard, you do have to have achieved it. Again, put yourself in the mind of an assessor, think about what would you want to see, and it's great to have aspirations, but basically what we're trying to look for is what is actually happening at the moment. So for the vast majority of your standards, we need to be seeing criteria that have been met at this point in time, or the point in time of the assessment. So that's kind of it in terms of the key points to consider. As David mentioned earlier, there are some red lines that have been developed for level 1, and this came out of for regions that do go through the self-assessment into level 2. There are quite a lot of lessons that we've learned in terms of common things that when we ask for them as part of the level 2, we find that they've not necessarily happened. So David will take you through those, but hopefully that's been helpful.
Thanks, Jane. There's a question from Catherine in the chat. Catherine's asked if evidence could include recorded Teams meetings. Absolutely, it could, if you can find an easy way to share that. The problem with recorded meetings is they're pretty large files, but if you can find a way to share that with your assessor, that would absolutely be acceptable. Yeah, it's a good question, Catherine. Thank you for asking that. Just before I go on to the red lines, are there any other questions at this point? I'm not trying to force you to ask questions, but giving an opportunity if you want to ask anything at this particular moment in time. Nope. Okay, we will move on. So I'm not going to read through every single detail on the following slides. It's just to really give you an example of what we're talking about. And these, as Jane said, these are the things where assessors have noted problems with doing assessments over the past year or so. So there are around 10 criteria that you absolutely have to demonstrate to move on to level 2. What we are trying to put in place with colleagues in the central team is that they will actually be checking these at level 1 as well, just to make sure that when you submit your level 1 evidence, there is good information around each of these. We will be sharing these slides, so they need to scribble notes down frantically. We'll make sure you have these. So as you can see, there are a number of items there where you really do have to have clear evidence that these are being met. As I say, I'm not going to talk through them all. You can read them for yourself, but you'll see that most of those are related to issues to do with One NHS Finance. The ones on that first page there are around engagement with value makers, health and wellbeing champions, and so on and so forth. So those are the first set of things where you absolutely must demonstrate your achievement. Secondly, I think the first one on there or the first two on there are absolutely essential. I would be astonished if anybody was putting this forward for level one, never mind level two, if all the staff in the team didn't have an up-to-date job description, didn't have objectives, and didn't have an annual appraisal. I'm sure you'd all agree and understand that those are key parts of any kind of learning and development within your team. We also do like you to ensure that you are registered with the professional bodies for CPD and training. We do know that at the moment the SEMA model is being held up while they just consider how they're doing that. And the SIP for one, we know you have to pay a fee for that membership. Discuss those two issues with your assessors. There are ways around it. SEMA are quite happy to write to you and say, you were assessed before they put their scheme into abeyance. So, but you do have to demonstrate you have the relevant registrations for those professional bodies. And then finally, two key things really. One is that you've got the development strategy and action plan in place. For level two, it's no good presenting your assessment with something that was written the week before they come in to do the assessment. It has to be a plan that's been in place for a little while and that you can demonstrate, as I said, all the way along that is operational. And then the final one is just around ensuring that you've done the checklist in the diversity and inclusion resource pack. So those criteria there, you really do need to make sure that at level one you're meeting them, and then when your assessor comes in to do their level two assessment, they will be absolutely key things. Jane said that you can sort of almost achieve some of the criteria and still get through level two. For all of these, you absolutely must be achieving them. You'll see they're all at level one, but there are key parts of level two as well. So you have to show they've been achieved at level one and then maintained in the period from your achieving at level one through to the date of the assessment at level two. So again, I'm just going to pause very briefly there. As I say, we will share those slides with you so you can see what those key items are. Are there any questions around any of those or the concept of the red lines at this point? Nope. Okay, I shall move you on back to Jane, who's going to talk about a couple of things to note and then a brief summary.
Yeah, thanks, David. And just before we move on to that, I would say that in the assessments that I've done for level two, the finance development strategy has been the main thing, that's the key thing that's been missing. Now that's, again, I've normally been assessing people who are not in the Northwest who've done a self-assessment at level one. But that is so because I know how key that is the first thing that I look for, and I'm glad to see that it's now as part of the red lines. It doesn't need to be a massively long document. There are lots of samples if people want to have a look at things that organisations have done, but it is absolutely key to making the whole thing work. So so as I say, really pleased to see that in the red lines. So in terms of things to note, I said it at the beginning, but just to remind you that as part of the process, we look at a range of evidence. And starting at the bottom of the slide, the sort of written evidence, if you like. I mean, it's not written on not normally on physical pieces of paper, but sort of electronic files. What we do with organisations is we arrange a way of collating that information of the organisation. Once an organisation said they want to submit level two, they are linked up with assessors, and you arrange a way that the assessors can have a look at that information. Most commonly, they set up a shared group on Teams, so that the evidence can be uploaded by the organisation, and then the assessors can have a look at it. And the point that's been made here is when you're doing that evidence bit, please, again, back to my exam technique and stuff, be kind to your assessors, label your evidence, order it, try and make it really easy is just good practice in terms of, you know, if you want someone to have a look at your evidence favourably, make it easy for them, make it clear which part it's applying to, give the assessors any notes if it's incomplete or if it needs any sort of explanation. Just do whatever you would do in terms of making it straightforward and common sense. But coming back to the top of the slide, just a reminder that there are 3 meetings as part of a level 2 assessment. The first one, as I mentioned earlier, is with the CFO, typically about half an hour, maybe a little bit longer, but that's an opportunity to ask the CFO about some of the specific things that we would expect a CFO to know about the assessment, but also to test out anything that's come out of that kind of written evidence. So, you know, if there's an area where it says that it's not quite ready, we might be asking the CFO about their plans to bring that through. We might be asking the CFO about how they actually look back on, reflect on how the progress has been made over the year in terms of delivering the development strategy. We're likely to be asking them about their kind of finance's contribution to the wider organisation and how the team, you know, supports everyone else and becomes a sort of key part of the workings of the organisation. And as David said earlier, not just sitting as a back office finance function. So that's usually the first thing that we get set up, because CFO diaries are incredibly tricky. So that as the person leading the assessment, that will be one of the first things that you'll be asked to do by your assessors. We also ask to see at least 2 budget holders to the assessors, and this can be meetings individually with the assessors and a single budget holder, or you know, more commonly a couple of budget holders come into a meeting with the assessors. It's also quite nice, seen it done in some assessments, to actually bring the budget holders in as part of the discussion with the finance team, because then the finance team get the feedback directly from the budget holders. So it's just something that some organisations do. Some might feel uncomfortable with it. It might be a little bit too tricky to organise, but it is quite a nice way of getting that kind of direct feedback from the budget holders. But the kind of things we're asking budget holders around is about whether they access finance training, what sort of support they get from their management accountants, how confident they feel. So it's quite an important part of the assessment, because as David said, we're looking at level 2 to make sure that the finance department is kind of integrated and integral to the running of the organisation. So the good thing is, from your point of view, and David will close his ears, you do get to choose your budget holders. So hopefully you can talk to them beforehand and explain a bit about the process, and choose ones that will at least represent you in a good light. But it is a really key part of the process, and really interesting from the assessor's point of view. You get some sometimes some quite different views from the budget holders that you do from the finance team, positive and negative. And then the final meeting that we have is meeting or meetings, if you're a large organisation, depending on how you want to do it, is for the assessors to meet with round about a quarter is the recommended amount of the finance team. And we hope that we try to, well, what works best is if you get a spread across all the different parts of the department, all different grades and seniorities. And the idea is that the assessors use that meeting to triangulate the written evidence that they've been provided by just asking some questions. So the kind of things we will ask is, you know, who's a value maker? When did you last have your appraisal? Has anyone here got any examples of different training that you've been on? So quite a lot of standard questions that we'll be doing, that's really just kind of cross-checking the organisation. But then there'll be some more kind of curvebally ones that are really trying to pick out a bit more about what's the culture like. And they're not really that curvebally, but the kind of thing, you know, would you recommend someone to work here, is a really great question that I've heard some assessors give. And what that does is it really gives the assessors a feel for the culture of the organisation. That's certainly what I'm looking for as an assessor. I'd be interested to see what if David agrees, but it's really to try and get that feel for what is it like to work there. So at the end of the day, we're doing the accreditation to demonstrate that places are a great place to work, that they're somewhere that where the staff feel supported, and they feel that they, well, just somewhere where they would want to work themselves. So as it says on the slide, it's the evidence, and particularly the evidence at the at the meetings is a chance to show off the great things that are going on. So use it, you know, make sure that you get people to encourage them to speak up in the meetings, put the good bits of evidence in the written schedule, because it really is your chance to show off and shine. But as I said at the beginning, it's not an audit. We are not kind of saying that, oh, this is not the best SFI policy that we've seen anywhere across the, to be honest, the assessors are probably not going to read every word of your SFI document. We are all working practitioners. We've all got jobs to do. What we are looking at is the kind of, does the department have that whole range of policies? Do they look generally okay? Are they supporting people within the organisation? And is that culture, is the culture when we come to the meetings, is that supporting that? So it is not a tick box, it's not an audit, it's really about trying to demonstrate. We're giving our like little seal of approval, if you like, on your organisation, and we're just basically saying, yeah, this organisation says they're good and we agree. That's how I see it when I'm doing an assessment. So that's it in terms of things to note. David, you can flick onto the last slide. So in terms of, in summary, we just thought it'd be 3 little tips in terms of where to go next. First one is to be realistic about what you've done in terms of making sure that you've got a realistic time scale, and in terms of presenting your evidence. The second one is be open and honest. The assessors are all people who have or are currently working in NHS finance. So, you know, we know that everything's not perfect. It wouldn't be perfect if we were doing it on our organisations or previous organisations, but you know, be honest and open with them about it. Talk things through, plan it out. It is very much a joint process between the organisations and the assessors. It is not an audit. It is not a kind of give us everything and we're just going to tell you what you've done wrong. It is a process of having a look at what you're doing, sharing things, and as we said on the previous slide, an opportunity to show off and really demonstrate the good stuff that you've done. And as the final tip, it's just a really great idea to talk to other accredited organisations. So firstly, in terms of sharing things that they've done, talking about their process. And I know that there's quite a lot of organisations who do showcases through One NHS Finance or get involved in presenting what they've done. So have a look at those, but just talk to them, find out what it's like. Talk to people who are assessors. And if you're not an assessor already, you know, think about becoming one, because I think that one of the best tips of how do you get through your level 2 and level 3 is if you've got an assessor, they know what it's like from the other side. So so that's it in terms of our summary, and I'll leave it there, David, and we can see if there are any questions.
Okay, I shall stop sharing my slides because I don't think we need a slide saying any questions. Does any right, Catherine, thank you for your question. You're doing a great job for us, Catherine. Thank you. If you contact the One NHS Finance team on one.finance@nhs.net, they will help you get yourself set up as an assessor. And what we'll do is normally you won't be thrown into an assessment on your own. You'll work with a colleague to begin with, and sort of the best way to learn is learning by doing. So you'll sit alongside somebody and go through a process with them. This is probably a good point for me to plug a session that I'm doing next Tuesday at 2 o'clock on being an assessor. If that might, as Jane just said, that might give you a few more hints and tips around getting your assessment in place. Again, you can contact Natasha. Oh, she's just put the link in the chat. Thanks, Natasha. And you can book there. So that's that question. Jane, do you want to answer Karen's question around the 25% of the finance team meeting the assessors?
Yeah, so yeah, thanks, Karen. So it's up to you how you want to do it, but just thinking about time, it would take quite a long time for most organisations for the assessors to meet with people individually. So what normally happens in the world of online that we're in at the moment is most assessments, certainly in our region, are done online. I know some are still face to face, but they're online, and it will tend to be a sort of a group meeting. So let's say there are 3 assessors and they would come along to, it might be that you can fit 25% of your finance teams into one meeting, and that would be kind of manageable. If you've got a really big team, you might want to split it across a couple of different meetings, but it's like coming along to a team meeting and talking about accreditation, is the way I would describe it. But it's absolutely up to you to agree that with your assessors. But remembering that they've got a day job to do, I would suggest that they'll probably want to do 1 or 2 meetings with your finance team to do that kind of triangulation bit. Is that fair enough, David?
Yeah, I was just going to say, in the last assessment that I did, I think we had 3 meetings with about 8 or 9 people in each of the meetings. If it gets much bigger than that, it's difficult for everyone to have a say, and it's quite hard as an assessor to kind of make sure that everyone has a chance to comment. So yeah, you can meet if you've got a small team, Karen. Absolutely, you can meet individually. If you're talking a normal size finance team, I would definitely recommend working in groups. Oh, and thank you for your comment, Karen. That's helpful. Thank you. We've got a few minutes left. Jane and I are not going to keep you on the call until 2:45 for the sake of it. I'm sure you've got other things you can be getting on with, even if it's just making a cup of tea. Are there any other questions at this point you'd like to ask, or anything that's been unclear in what we've said? No, I can see a few people shaking their heads. That's great. Thank you. What I would say is that when we send the slides out to you, both my email address and Jane's email address are on those slides. Please feel free to contact us. If colleagues in the Northwest are even more confused now than they were before, please do drop me a line, and either Jackie or I will get back to you and explain why we're different in the Northwest and do things in a slightly different way. We would say better, but then we're biased, aren't we? So that's just the way it goes. So thank you very much for your time. Most importantly of all, good luck with your assessments. I hope this has helped. I hope you feel better placed now to get yourselves ready for that level 2 assessment. And all the very best. Thank you very much and have a great afternoon. Cheers, everyone.